Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, October 5th, 2023. Time for another speaker. And another show, of course. As I said in the morning post, if I recall correctly, from last night when I was half asleep when I read it, yesterday was, of course, cosmically speaking, the first day of the rest of Kevin McCarthy's life not being speaker. Today's the second. So, very good. Okay, we have now to, or I guess yesterday was the first full day of it anyway. So, hooray! It's been exciting, and now we're watching the contortions of the rest of the Republican conference, trying to figure out who they can install in his place. Of course, Jim Jordan has pretty much decided that he's eligible and a front runner. Steve Scalise wants in, despite the fact that he really should be concentrating probably on his cancer treatment. But hey, I can't make that decision for him. God can only send him so many signs. I have noticed that people are resurrecting his old and very dumb statement that he is somehow David Duke without the baggage. I don't know what kind of baggage it, of course, I guess thought, well, the baggage of everybody knowing that you're David Duke. But if you're a believer in psychic or karmic baggage, or you're a believer in a God who keeps accounts, or however you want to express it, I will only say that Steve Scalise has lived to catch a bullet and contract cancer, and I think the baggage is accumulating. I don't know how many signs you can be given, but this guy keeps wasting his chances. Anyway, I got to keep one eye on what's going on here with college boy number 2, who, of course, is in the germ pit that is a college campus, and we got to see if we can get him to get through the sore throat that he's contracted, and we'll find out what kind of sore throat it is and see if I can guide him to the health clinic and go find out. But I didn't want to wake up to this message, but got kind of a, did you pack any masks for me, by the way? Yes, of course I did. It's a good question. Should ask that question, and the correct response is yes, I did, and you should find them and go ahead. Are people getting sick around you and you're worried about that? Oh no, too late, you're already sick. Oh boy. Okay, so fingers crossed, and hoping that it's just your typical case of who knows what, common cold that gets passed around. But close quarters college living, always a risk. All right. Well, we'll bring Greg Dworkin in to diagnose him third hand over Skype, because that's the professionally responsible thing to do. All right, much to cover today, and if you want, all of it can be about how bad Kevin McCarthy was, or what have you. The Republicans having a field day attempting to continuing to attempt, I guess I should say, to try to blame Democrats somehow for this whole thing. Yeah, although Democrats did cast a lot of votes against him, the idea that something shocking went on, or there was something untoward about Democrats not voting to retain a Republican speaker is otherworldly. It's never happened before. I mean, it has. It happens every single time that Democrats just don't vote for the people nobody votes for people from the other party to become speaker or retain their speakership. It's just that very rarely do we ever vote on the question of whether a speaker should be retained. So I don't know. They're furious at Democrats for not bailing them out. Not that anyone believes for a minute that if the shoe were on the other foot, Republicans would have bailed out a Democratic speaker. There's just not a possibility. But they continue on with this. Luckily, there's still people who print this garbage, but I just don't get the sense that their hearts are in it. I don't think that even the political press buys into this story very much. But maybe I'm not reading the dumbest, worst possible stories. So Greg Dworkin is here to say that he may have collected some of the worst stories, or at least from the dumbest people. But probably some smart stuff too. So good morning, Greg. How you doing?
Good morning. I hope that is not a brand name sore throat. That's all I can say. So
right.
Let's test. And
they're not paying us to say it's not the Super Bowl sore throat, but
suburb owl.
Yes,
of all.
You have to pay now to say those words. So okay. Well, I hope it's just a regular. I don't know what kind of sore throat. How many kinds are there?
Tons.
Okay.
Lots.
All right, could be any then. Great. All right, one eye on that.
It's over 100, versions of the common cold. So.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well,
we shall see. So Clyde Haberman, I think, got it right. I think you're right. The media is understanding that this is silly. They say it because they say it in the context of Republicans saying it, but they don't really believe that Democrats did the wrong thing by voting the way they did. They understand that Democrats did the expected thing. Let me give you an example. Veteran newsman Clyde Haberman, father of Maggie Haberman, but a newspaper man of his own right in his day, says, we may yet get worse than McCarthy as House Speaker like Jim Jordan. But that's no reason to mourn McCarthy's downfall or to criticize Democrats for not bailing him out. He was untrustworthy for Democrats and radical Republicans alike, and he brought his demise on himself. Mm-hmm. So I think everybody understands that.
All right. Good. I hope so. I mean, it's the most basic thing there is. I mean, I don't know why they pretend not to know this, but they're all elected officials, and the speakership is an elected position. And if enough people don't like you, you won't be elected to that position. It's just,
and that's an important point. And I think that we're going to wind up talking about it in terms of just the Republican caucus alone, but in general, writ large, you really can't be a leader of your conference or caucus if the Hastert rules apply. And one of the Hastert rules, of course, is that Hastert is Dennis Hastert, the former disgraced Speaker of the House,
that guy
is required by law to endorse Jim Jordan because, they fall in the same bucket.
Yeah,
the other Hastert rule is that you do things by the majority of the majority. And actually, that makes a good deal of sense if you're trying to keep your group, your caucus, your conference together, and you want to retain your position, and you want to continue as leader. And if you have a minority of your group who supports you, and you're always making deal with the other group, the opposition, not the enemy, but the opposition, you're going to fail. And, that's a really important concept that a lot of people don't get. For example, the Problem Solvers Caucus.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right? It's about 30 Republicans and about 30 Democrats, and they work together and they solve problems, except they really don't. And in this particular situation, and I actually have an article about it, the Problem Solvers Caucus is imploding over the McCarthy drama. We went over it yesterday. The Republicans on the Problem Solvers Caucus were really upset that Democrats voted against McCarthy, and they threatened to walk en masse, but they didn't, they haven't, they won't. Oh. And that's not really why I'm telling the story. I told that story yesterday. What's important today is that some people are floating the idea that maybe Republican leader of the problem-solving caucus, Brian Fitzpatrick, could be a consensus candidate for Speaker. Because the Democrats would vote for him, and if the 30 problem solvers voted for him, he's the next Speaker.
Don't do that.
And so the numbers add up, but not the logic, because the majority of Democrats won't vote for him.
Yeah.
Why? Because Democrats don't vote for the other party's Speaker.
That's right.
And, we just learned that. And at the same time, if the problem solvers wound up voting with the Democrats to make Fitzpatrick Speaker over, let's say, Hakeem Jeffries, then they probably get thrown out of the Republican conference.
Okay.
I mean, it just the rest of the party is not going to tolerate that.
No.
It would be pretty embarrassing if the speaker got thrown out of the Republican caucus for the same reason.
Right. You'd think they'd frown on that.
Right. Speaking of frowning on that, I don't even know if McCarthy's going to stay
all the time.
in the House. I mean, Pelosi did, but she's, emerita and highly respected. She
had an office, but now she doesn't, an extra office, and now apparently she doesn't care a great deal about that. But
right.
Okay.
So actually, Greg Sargent writes about that. The throwing out, the idea that Republicans should have voted with the Democrats should have voted with the Republicans. But actually, the Democrats voted the way they voted. And what happened is that 8 Republicans voted with the Democrats. Mm-hmm. That's a fact. That's what happened. And everybody understands that. And so blaming the Democrats for the 8 Republicans that voted with Democrats is just dumb. So Greg Sargent says all of this is absurd, but it's also revealing. In a sense, what Republicans really wanted from Democrats is help in solving a problem that's grown intractable for them. At critical moments such as these, there's nothing holding the House GOP majority together. Mm-hmm. That's why it's so important to have a majority of the majority. If the whole majority doesn't hold together, then how do you do anything? So Gaetz and his insurgents ousted McCarthy mainly because he agreed to pass, along with many Democrats, temporary funding. McCarthy's enemies wanted him to shut down the government to force Biden and Democrats to accept savage spending cuts, which, by the way, may I just respectfully point out, wasn't going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
They see joining Democrats to keep the government open as capitulation. And what's become clear now is that there's no Republican majority in the House united behind any governing approach. The Gaetz faction is committed to a project that most House Republicans are not, eschewing consensus governing entirely whenever possible and making no concessions to Democrats whatsoever. So in this, the Gaetz crew has been urged on by Trump, who wants Republicans to shut down the government, total war posture. But that's not where McCarthy and most House Republicans are. Their game is to indulge Trump, and not all the time. They're willing to run bad faith investigations and do this and do that, but they're not willing to damage their own political prospects or infuriate big donors.
Yes. Well,
because shutting down the government would infuriate big donors.
Yeah.
So Republicans think Democrats should have helped them save, themselves from that problem. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, Republicans want Democrats to stand by while they do whatever they want. Yeah. And Democrats can't do that.
Oh. Why not?
Because it doesn't make any sense for Democrats.
Oh, well, okay. I guess maybe people have agency. They can do what they want.
They want. You know who understands this? Mitt Romney understands this.
Wow.
He said he doesn't fault Democrats for not bailing McCarthy out. He said, and I quote, "I think Speaker McCarthy made a decision to get as close as he possibly could to the radical wing of his party, and by doing that, he made it virtually impossible for the Democrats to come to his aid."
Uh-huh.
And I think that is, in fact, what we in the business say is true.
Okay. Well, all right. Now that we've discovered the truth, what else do we do for the day?
Well, we still talk about the truth.
This is the truth. This is it. The ultimate truth has been discovered.
Right. There was a very, very interesting tweet thread by a insider, a House guy, works with Don Beyer, Northern Virginia's Virginia 8. That's your, state, even if it's not your part of the country.
Yeah, it's nearby. It's Northern Virginia, yeah.
Yeah. And he's a good guy.
Sure.
And, he was explaining to people yesterday what was going on. And I think it was a really, really good piece. He said, look, it's pretty evident people don't understand a key piece of House Democrats' thinking on McCarthy and governance. The idea that we acted out of schadenfreude or pique with no thought to the legislative outlook is, of course, silly nonsense.
Yes.
But here's what those takes are actually missing.
Oh.
And I didn't give that to you, so let me give it to you here. On Saturday morning, we had no idea what was happening. Scalise told the GOP they were moving bills that signaled shutdown, and that's what we expected. And then all of a sudden, McCarthy announced a vote on the CR. We didn't know what to make of it. He didn't give us any time to read it.
Yeah.
McCarthy had been resisting doing this all along. So we figured he wanted us, the Democrats, to vote against the suspension so we'd be blamed for the shutdown. And maybe that's in fact true. Our members believed it. Without naming names, I can say I heard from multiple members yesterday as they were weighing how to vote. That was with hindsight about what happened. So in this moment, you look to McCarthy for signals. And what signals is McCarthy sending us? We would like to read the 200 billion, 71-page bill we've never seen. You promised 72 hours, but, we'll settle for 90 minutes. And McCarthy said, go F yourself.
Really? For 90 minutes?
You can't have 90 minutes. You have to vote on it right now.
Okay, all right. Does somebody have a flight they need to make?
So Frischner says, look, we didn't know this, and it was infuriating. So, well, we're going to take our time, but we're satisfied. We'll pass your bill to help you get out of a jam. And so McCarthy goes on TV and says, well, the Democrats wanted to shut down the government and screw the troops.
Yeah, no one liked that. But that needs to be emphasized that essentially the day before, pretty much, they were like, you know what? For the good of the country, we'll help you out of a jam. And then he said, screw you, you're a bunch of idiots. So the lesson
we're
very
trying
quickly
to screw our
is
troops and shut the government down.
Right. So it's like, you mean I should help you out of a jam like I did on Saturday and then you screwed me on Sunday? I guess I know what's coming. Maybe I'll be a no.
We know that you've been doing this the entire time, but we thought like when push comes to shove and it's really down to the last minute, you'd be reasonable. No, I guess you're going to be just like you've always been.
So for the government shutdown, he was no help and gave no credit. So this one was just a personal thing for him. So to hell with it.
So Frischner says, look, people want us to give the guy credit for stopping a shutdown, but it's still not clear to me right now sitting here writing this that's what he intended.
That's true too. Oops, I kept the government open. What?
Right. And, I said yesterday on Twitter, and I still believe this, I believe that Kevin McCarthy thought that the Democrats would shut the government down, and they didn't. And Matt Gaetz thought the Democrats would save McCarthy, and they didn't. And so both of them are now stuck with their... Let's have some game theory here.
I guess so. Never consulting, I guess, the other side. Oh, what would you do if we did this?
Right. So Frischner says, look, people wanted us to give this guy credit, but we don't know that that's what he intended. And this really matters, and not just on an emotional level. The resolution set up not one but two new legislative problems. We have to pass an omnibus or face a shutdown again by Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And we have to fund military assistance to Ukraine.
Yes.
And we're told McCarthy's going to help us there. And what has McCarthy said? I never said anything like that.
Yeah. So he's a great partner for deal making.
So what's McCarthy signaling us on funding? He's going to steer us directly back into the crazy cuts and abortion restrictions. In other words, we're going to save him, and he's going to go right back to doing what he was just doing. So we're reasonable people. Maybe he's just telling them what they have to hear, and he'll screw them in the last minute. So basically, what he's saying to us, what is he giving us to think about in terms of why this is going on? Nothing. Yeah. He's not even talking to us.
I mean,
so we either have to believe that he's lying to us, if you want to just sum up what Aaron says next, or you have to believe he's lying to them.
Yeah.
And you expect us to act on the assumption he's lying to them without any signals from him and without any assurances that that's true. We're not going to do that.
Yeah, and pretty good evidence that he's lying to you already.
So a speakership founded upon Democrats' trust that McCarthy will lie to his own guys and not to us isn't rational, folks.
Yeah, that's a good explanation.
We needed him to give any reason to help him. He didn't give us a thing. So this comes down to trust, and that's the word I saw and heard from House Democrats more than any other word. We don't trust Kevin McCarthy, and he gave us no reason to. And that last part I'm adding is more important than the first part. You work with a lot of people you don't trust. You work with a lot of people you don't like. But you can't work with somebody who gives you no reason to work with them.
You certainly don't want to. You can. It's dumb, but you don't want to be dumb.
I mean, he didn't even give him a how. How are you supposed to do this?
How? Yeah.
So while I was writing this, a reporter said, paraphrased, isn't the problem that the next speaker won't be better? And many would add, and will likely be worse. And that's a fair question. Okay. And it's not an easy question, but start by looking at this from the Democrats' point of view. McCarthy speaker, you're looking ahead. The two most urgent things are funding in Ukraine, and he's refusing to give assurances on either. So choose the other adventure. Let's keep Kevin.
Okay.
What happens next?
No.
Well, we just voted to keep him. Why are we back in the same place doing the same things?
This is crazy. I can't believe it didn't work the second time.
Worse. We'll be trying to figure out funding in Ukraine, guessing what McCarthy will do, and motion to vacate votes can still happen any time. We're trying to game that out, too. Other guys who represent more votes are saying they don't want to toss McCarthy yet because it's not the right time, meaning they want to hold him hostage when they want to.
Right.
So you're back at the best possible outcome is McCarthy lying to his people and not us. So we're right back in the same place. Will the next speaker be worse? Nobody can possibly know who it'll be and what the dynamic will be. Right now we're looking at Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan, and we don't know if either one of them has enough votes. But at some point, this phrase has been trotted out in bad faith many times, so let's try to use it in good faith. You have to think about the institution and the country. Their so-called moderates who enabled McCarthy's empowerment to the right because he campaigned and raised money for them could have acted at any time to correct the course. They didn't. McCarthy spoke to the Republicans behind closed doors after he lost and referred to running the House in a bipartisan manner as selling his soul to the Democrats, a thing he'd said he'd rather lose his job than do. And you're telling us we can't do better than that? That's about as bad as you can get.
Yeah, okay. It's all excellent points, to say the least.
Right.
And
so, what are you asking of us? You're at, it's interesting because in another context, I had another thing that I had set aside, which I'm trying to find now, which has to do with the idea that it's the job of media. And this comes from an interview with a Wall Street Journal reporter, which I can't put my finger on at the moment. But the idea was he was interviewed and he said, look, it's our job to put together everything and tell a story.
Yeah.
And other reporters looked at that and said, no, it isn't.
It isn't?
It's your job to, get the facts together and tell the truth. And if you're trying to balance it because the story's better, you're distorting the facts.
Okay. I made the mistake there of it's an early morning and thinking, I thought the story you were going to tell was true. I didn't think, okay, yes. No, that's a good point.
You got to elide on the facts if, it screws up the story.
Yeah, I didn't realize. I forgot you said Wall Street Journal. So, all right. Well, my assumption was that you would tell a true story.
Right. So the media really wants both parties to be equally fair or unfair. They want both parties to equally lie. It helps their story that they want to tell. That they're above politics and they're simply reporting on this party versus that party, and that's all you need to know, and it's all about horse race. And it's not. And the very nature of the parties are so different, you could see it in the speaker battle.
Oh, yes. That's
right?
Where you can see
Nobody said for McCarthy supporters that we're supporting him because you can trust him.
Yes.
Everybody who voted against him said, no, you can't. We all know it.
Yeah.
The people who wanted him to stay for various reasons, mostly because it would make him look bad if he left. They didn't have any much love for him except for the fact that he raised a lot of money. And you know who he raised a lot of money for and voted against him anyway? Why, that would be Nancy Mace.
Oh, yeah.
And you know where there was a Nancy Mace sighting? In the second paragraph of this story from the New York Times, from a Capitol Hill basement, Bannon stokes the Republican Party meltdown. The former Trump advisor has helped create the spectacle of GOP dysfunction, using it to build his own following, and those are the right-wing House rebels who took down McCarthy. And on Wednesday morning, two Republicans, who hours earlier had toppled Kevin McCarthy, made a well-worn trek to a 19th century brick townhouse a few blocks away from the Capitol and entered the clutter sanctuary of Stephen Bannon's recording studio. And those two people were Matt Gaetz and, wait for it,
I'm waiting,
Nancy Mace of South Carolina, one of 7 other Republican defectors who huddled with Bannon for a morning meeting ahead of a joint appearance on his War Room podcast. I present to you the concept that Nancy Mace is not a moderate.
Yes, It's really interesting. Actually, I read that article. My brother Mark sent me that article, and it's an excellent thing. If we don't do it now, I'll ponder sharing the entirety of it with you later, because it's real interesting. It's hard to tell exactly what Nancy Mace is up to, but it's not honesty and transparency. So I'll submit that to you. But yeah, there's a real interesting dynamic that goes on there. The article points out that they're very often allegedly at one another's throats, Mace and Gaetz. But when it comes to grabbing publicity, and I guess Mace now has to worry about raising money and from a different source, they will happily sit together. I mean, that's close quarters in his little recording studio in the basement. I don't know whether this is the same house that the Egyptian weirdo gave him, or it's a different townhouse near Capitol Hill. But anyway, they got to sit in there pretty tight and hang out together, and they've been on the record as essentially wanting to murder one another in the past. So
right. So, to me, this is the telling part of that piece. His audience is still wary of Miss Mace, a fiscal conservative who leans toward the center on social issues, but Mr. Bannon sees her as a gift. Her vote to oust McCarthy allowed him and his cohorts to push back on the notion it was only an angry group of ultra-MAGA hardliners who had lost faith in McCarthy. Nancy's not a hard-right intransigent lawmaker.
Oh, no?
Mr. Gaetz said on the show.
On the show, anyway.
Miss Mace had previously called Mr. Gaetz a fraud and accused him of opposing Mr. McCarthy because he wouldn't defend him against allegations that he sex trafficked minors. In fact, Mark Wayne Mullen, the senator, got on TV yesterday and said, "We all know Gaetz does this stuff. He showed us the videos. That's why nobody wants to support him."
Yeah.
So they're getting pretty nasty over this. But I'm just saying, know your people by the company they keep, and that's the company Nancy Mace keeps.
You're absolutely right. There's no getting around it. However she may vote on issues, she's willing to put aside what she knows about Matt Gaetz to cooperate with him. That is something. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We made it, Greg, to 9:30. So
somehow, I would like to be done with McCarthy, but I'm not done with Kevin McCarthy because there's this piece in The Messenger that I thought was interesting.
The Messenger.
It's hardly definitive, and the question phrasing is difficult, but there's a poll. Voters say McCarthy shouldn't have been ousted. If you want, you can read that as so they don't like the 8 people like Nancy Mace who voted against him. And then the second part is, and they don't believe Democrats should have saved him.
All right.
And you could read that
that's
as
true too.
Aaron Frischner got it right. And so did Clyde Aberman, and so did Mitt Romney.
And all House Democrats.
On the other hand, they don't really like Congress. Well, who does?
That's Kevin McCarthy's fault.
Republican voters are split on former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's ouster, while a slight majority of all voters say he shouldn't have been removed in the first place. That's just so fascinating. The people who wanted him to stay are independents because they don't like politics. And if he's out, that means that politics intrudes on their life with news reports they don't want to hear about somebody they don't even know. So the independents are the ones who are most upset that he got kicked out. The Democrats wanted to keep him more than the Republicans, and the independents wanted to keep him more than the Democrats.
Okay.
And, no, they don't have to explain why. They're voters.
All right, yeah. There's no opportunity to explain why. There's no blanks to write an essay. It's just
right. So a new Messenger Harris poll, and Harris isn't the best pollster, but, it's the only poll we have, conducted online by Harris X, October 2 to 3. So it's a 2-day poll online for all the failings that has, found that 54% opposed McCarthy's ouster, 46% supported it, 70% agreed with McCarthy stepping down and said he shouldn't run for speaker again. So I don't want you to kick him out, but now you're out, forget it. I am in favor of the person in power who I heard of, and if they're not in power anymore, who needs them?
Yeah, well...
I mean, your typical voter.
Yeah, I mean, okay, it's an aggregate, so, you're going to get some mixed results.
Right. Among Republicans, 52% supported his removal, while 48% opposed it among Republicans. So it was pretty much even. 57% of Democrats and 59% of independents were against McCarthy's removal. 70% of respondents were aware he was removed as Speaker of the House. Well, that's good.
Okay.
Right.
Big news.
30% probably figured he ran your local school board. It was the first time in over 100 years the motion to vacate the chair was used against the sitting speaker. And so, therefore, I'm glad we spent so much time earlier on in the year on this MTV motion to vacate.
I want my MTV, as the kids say.
Right.
Said like 50 years ago.
As our fellow kids used to say 100 years ago.
Right.
Voters are split about McCarthy's ouster and believe Congress will be even more dysfunctional going forward. That's true.
Yeah.
They see the leadership tussle as a GOP matter to resolve. That's also true.
Yes.
Which means the GOP owns this rigmarole and we're ready to move on to a new figure as leader. All of that's true. That's what the pollster said. The poll said. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true.
Right about that one. Okay.
So in the aftermath, some Republicans have argued Democrats are to blame for McCarthy's demise, but voters aren't buying that argument just yet. A majority of voters, 64%, including 69% of Republicans, said picking a speaker is a matter for Republicans to resolve.
Well, yeah.
And only 36% said Democrats should have voted yes to save him.
Yeah, all right. Well, it's not a plurality, and they're right. You shouldn't, but it shouldn't even be a question. Really, it should be 100% answer.
Right. So 64% versus 36%. 64% said he goes. 36% said it's the Democrats' job to do this because, you know why?
I don't
know who the best speaker that we had in the last year?
In the last year?
Yeah. I mean, we know the best speaker we've ever had. That's Nancy Pelosi, who had the same slim majority and got everything done. Mm-hmm. And who could also, by the way, count votes.
Right.
And didn't lie to you, to your face, that you knew it.
Yeah.
When she lied to you, you couldn't even figure it out because it was so subtle.
All right.
But you know who the best speaker in the last year was?
In the last year. I mean, there's only one.
Mythical Kevin McCarthy.
Mythical Kevin McCarthy. I didn't realize
Mythical
we were
Kevin
splitting
McCarthy
him into
is
two
a
different
straight
kinds
shooter who's basically conservative but could work with Democrats and will work with Democrats when necessary for the good of the country. That's mythical Kevin McCarthy.
I see.
There's only one problem. He doesn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, why not? Then the best speaker was Nancy Pelosi, Kevin McCarthy.
Right.
But that doesn't exist
Nancy
either.
McCarthy, you know.
All right.
Kevin Pelosi. But the real Kevin McCarthy was none of those things. And so, you know, bye.
It was kind of funny listening to the supporters give the speeches about how effective he was and what a strong leader he was. It was kind of hilarious.
Especially Elise Stefanik. And Gaetz was funny when he challenged them on this.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh, you think he exceeded expectations? My God, how low were your expectations, Gaetz said.
Yeah, he had a point. It was on the top of his head, but he had it.
Yeah, he had a point. So this brings me to a different piece, which is a little bit more technical, from the D.C. Bureau of Government and Politics of News from the States, which raises a really interesting question. And of course, you know, this is where I turn to you and say, I don't know. How does a frozen U.S. House function without a speaker? Everybody's got an opinion, says the article. That's the headline.
Oh, all right. Well, I know that, Matthew Rigdon had that question, so maybe this will answer some of it.
Right. Molly Reynolds, senior fellow in governance studies at the Brookings Institution, said Wednesday during a panel discussion the role of Speaker pro tempore was designed as a way to bolster continuity of government. The language of the rule itself isn't entirely clear on what powers the Speaker pro tem has, whether it's all of the powers of the office of the Speaker or just authorities that allow him to effectuate a new election. There's two schools of thought. I would put myself in the camp that the Speaker pro tem, McHenry, has the full powers of the speakership with the possible exception of sitting in the line of succession. And also, I would argue he can't swear people in.
Okay, that's an interesting possibility.
Because he's not a constitutional.
Yeah, although they can take care of that by having the clerk do it.
Yeah. My logic there is that given how the clerk has more power than the acting speaker, in my view, in that specific thing. But, who knows? I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a member of Congress. And the truth is, even if you don't want to read the whole article, elsewhere, even if it doesn't say it in this article, the truth of the matter is the acting speaker can do whatever the particular House in session allows him to do.
That is true, too. That's a good way of putting it. If he wants to do those things and
they don't object, he can do them.
Yeah, and if someone does object and they win the vote, he could do them.
So Molly said, my logic there is that given how this rule was originally designed, which is to allow somebody to act as speaker in the event of a real crisis, not this fake crisis, that you would not necessarily have wanted to develop a rule that would limit the person's power in an actual emergency. And the idea behind a pro tempore is the person can act in the absence of a speaker. Jason Roberts, a political sciences professor at the University of North Carolina, told State's Newsroom. So I interpret that to mean the speaker, pro tempore, can do basically whatever they choose to do. And every move McHenry makes would become a precedent for future temporary speakers.
All right.
Now, test of McHenry's power could end up being settled by a majority of the House, experts said.
There you go. That's what you just said.
And you know what's really interesting? You could argue, even though he's an asshole and a jerk, McHenry kicking Pelosi and Hoyer out of their hideaways, as they like to call them, which is, I guess, small offices closer to the action.
Yeah.
Because each of them, as a congressperson, would have their own, constituent office.
Yeah, they have that still.
So the fact that McHenry did that means he could do that. And if he could do that, he could do other things. So in terms of what happens if we need to, let's say, get a government bill passed so we could keep the government open, it's good that McHenry can do stuff and not just be there as a figurehead to get an election done next week, which may not have enough votes. So, if you want to say that you want to make a lemonade out of lemons, or say that 'tis an ill wind that blows nobody any good, I don't really care if Hoyer and Pelosi have ceremonial offices. They don't really either. They would rather not be treated shabbily. But in the grand scheme of things, they understand that it's not the most important thing in the world. In fact, that's what Pelosi's response was. That office to me isn't important. Doing the people's business is important. And that's what they need to get down to. And that's true. It was a good response.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's correct. And what else are they going to say? And, this probably lays out a pretty good case for why you'd want them to exercise at least some of the power. And there's nothing you should be terribly afraid of. And as long as it does exclude the access to the line of succession, I'm not certain I would draw the line any shorter than that. And, although, it is kind of weird to just say, well, we'll get rid of the speaker and then just, that doesn't mean anything. We can just continue on as before. Seems odd, too.
Right. So Section 8B3A of Rule 1 says, in the case of a vacancy in the office of Speaker, the next member on the list described in Subdivision B, and that was Patrick McHenry, because Kevin McCarthy made that list the day after he was elected Speaker, but it was secret, shall act as Speaker pro tempore until the election of a Speaker or a Speaker pro tempore. Pending such election, the member acting as Speaker pro tempore, that would be Patrick McHenry, may exercise such authorities of the office of the Speaker as may be necessary and appropriate to that end. So what end is that? Is it to elect a new Speaker, or is it to be Speaker of the House? So that's what the argument is about.
Okay.
And there's other rules that people have quoted. Some of the Democrats have said, no, here's a rule over here clearly saying it's only for the election of the new person, says so right here in a different rule. So, the experts will argue about that. I'm not an expert. I'm not getting into the discussion other than to tell you there is a discussion to be had about that.
Okay.
But it's really interesting. It's just really interesting because nobody anticipated this. This is the first time this has ever happened. Yeah,
that's true. So it's difficult to know. And the design of the rule as it stood makes sense in the case of, national emergency, right? You want to obviously have that, but it is interesting that it's a continuity of, and I referred to it sort of as a continuity of government thing, and then rethought it and decided, well, if it doesn't put him in the line of succession, and it's not really a continuity of government in that sense, but continuity of the functioning of the House, because otherwise they just all sit there and do nothing and no legislative business. At the beginning of a new Congress, no legislative business gets done until there's a speaker elected, but that's also because the speaker, once elected, does important things like swear everybody into the House. Mm-hmm. There's no members of the House per se, even though they all stand there and they answer their names when the roll is called. And it's one of those weird moments when they are and aren't members of the House. But once that's settled, then I guess you could designate most of your power to somebody else if you feel like it.
Right. Well, Matt Glassman then pulls up and says, here's another thing in support of broader powers for the acting speaker. Mm-hmm. There's something called House practice. And then under that, there's one of those, what looks like a Silk Road 2 term of office vacancy.
Okay.
And here's the wording exactly. It's short so I can read it. The member acting as Speaker pro tempore under this provision may exercise such authorities of the office of Speaker as may be necessary and appropriate until the election of a Speaker or a Speaker pro tempore.
Aha. Take your time.
That makes it sound like, well, they can do whatever they want, at least until they're replaced.
You can restart ice delivery.
Yeah. So, and then there's the narrow view, which you can take.
Which the conservatives by nature
narrow view was from Deschler's Volume 18 Appendix.
Ooh. Okay. I had that removed.
There were new rules adopted in 2003, Rule 1, Clause 8, permitting the Speaker, once elected, to name other sworn members in a listed order rather than the clerk, who would serve as Speaker pro tempore in the event of vacancy of the office, solely to preside over the election of a new Speaker, it being considered preferable to having a sworn member preside whenever possible. So this makes it sound like the only reason that there is an acting Speaker is because you don't want to give the clerk that kind of power, even though they have that kind of power. Mm-hmm. And you certainly don't want to give it to just like a random member.
I mean, I do. I just think they should do it at random.
Yeah. Well, they have random people in the Congress.
Right.
So,
why not? Sure.
I mean, Matt Gaetz is about as random as they come, for example. And so is Nancy Mace. So, you got an argument there.
The forehead caucus.
Right. So Jim McGovern found yet another different rule in 2004.
Oh.
And this one says, requiring the Speaker to submit a list of designees to serve as Speaker pro tempore, quote, for the sole purpose of electing a new Speaker, end quote, in the event of a vacancy. So the whole reason for that list was to elect a new Speaker, according to this other different rule. And that's the thing. If the House has other different rules that sort of contradict each other, it still comes down to, well, the guy can do whatever he wants as long as the House lets him.
Till someone stops him. Yeah. Okay. I mean, and you have to figure that they're,
so it's just interesting that it's clear nobody thought this through, and they're going to have to tune that up a little bit after this.
Yeah. Well, it had never happened before, so they didn't bother to spend much time on it. And common sense would tell you, if there's any such thing anymore, McHenry will be somewhat, you'd think, he is a jerk. He might be somewhat chastened by the fact that they just threw a Speaker out of office. And so if the question is, well, I can go as far as the House will let me, and you have to start imagining how far will the House let you go, you probably pause at some point and say, why am I Speaker pro tem again? Oh, yeah, that's right. The House just decided not to let the other guy go any further.
Well,
we should watch that.
We have a week because everybody is assuming that the Speaker election is going to be next week because that's what McHenry said. We know there are two people running. We don't know if anybody else is going to run. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump has been nominated. We should probably talk about that a little bit. Okay, we did.
Okay, there you
go. Marjorie Taylor Greene said she'd nominate him. Some other guy, Troy Nehls, said he'd nominate Trump. I cannot imagine Trump actually wants a job where you have to work.
Well, he doesn't have to.
Or that your main function is to go around raising money for other people.
That will bother
And it turns
him.
out, actually, Steve Scalise has raised a considerable amount of money, just nowhere near what Kevin McCarthy has done.
Okay. I can believe it.
And I don't know that Jim Jordan has. So if you are of the view that you vote for Speaker because they raise money for you, which is not an unreasonable way to look at it, since traditionally that's part of the deal.
Yes, that's a good point.
Then Scalise has a leg over Jordan, and neither of them can compare to McCarthy.
Okay, I mean that sounds about right. And sometimes it's chicken and egg too, right? If you're in leadership,
once you're speaker,
it's easy
then all
to
of a
raise
sudden,
money.
once you're on the banking committee, all of a sudden you can raise money.
Yeah, so you
said
do.
Phil Graham.
So right, these things are complementary, and in the Democratic caucus, it's always been the case that if you're short on time and you have to predict who will win a leadership race, you check how much money have they raised for their leadership PACs and just compare them. You add up all their
and try
years
and see when they've been doled out, like yesterday, the day before.
Mm-hmm. That too. I mean, if you have more time, then you analyze when did they disperse it? Or the first thing you look at is how much did they raise. If you have 5 minutes, if you have 10 minutes, how much did they disperse from their
And then if
accounts?
you have 15, who did they disperse it to?
Yes.
But on the Republican side, it doesn't work that way anymore, because Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene can simply go online and raise money. And that's why Nancy Mace got a ton of money from Kevin McCarthy and then stabbed him in the back.
Yeah. Well, I mean, once you're done getting the money, stab. If you're stabby, do it.
Yeah.
Get the money.
Right.
And then move on. But you can raise
the
your own money.
Stabby Mace from South Carolina. That actually works out pretty good.
Yeah, right. And we'll see what if anything she spray paints or chalks on her sidewalk this week, and maybe it helps her raise money. They don't need the speaker's help necessarily raising money, and they can raise their own. They can turn and raise it for others too, and also the Republican conference doesn't operate, oddly enough, they're a little less money-based and more ideologically based, which is kind of what people have always said they wanted for the Democratic caucus too, but it depends on who you're dealing with. If you
the Democrats don't have as much money, and it's harder to get, so they spend more time trying to get it, whereas the GOP is just showered with money from crazy billionaires.
And it doesn't matter if you're crazy, maybe it's even better. If you're crazy, you'll get crazy billionaire money, and there isn't any other kind of billionaire money.
So Jonathan Allen wrote an interesting piece I'm going to bring in here. We don't have to spend a whole lot of time on it. It's just the title and the subheader gives you an idea here.
You won't even get the title on Twitter.
The GOP armed its bazooka caucus. What could go wrong?
Okay.
Analysis: Republicans now use powerful procedural weapons, impeachment, removal of the speaker, election certification, to thwart majority rule and disrupt democratic institutions. And of course, that's not a good thing. But the reason I'm bringing that up now, we sort of know this, is that look at Patrick McHenry and think about his tasks, not his goals, but his tasks over the next couple of weeks. On the one hand, he's got to figure out what to do with keeping the government open, which may mean another CR that maybe he gets a little more leeway with because he's new, and this just happened. He's got to figure out what to do with Ukraine money, but he's also got to figure out what to do with the motion to vacate and election certification in the future, and the rule about who the acting speaker. I mean, there's stuff to do. And what he spends his capital doing and what he spends his time doing, we don't know yet. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what kind of guy he is and how he does things. And does he think of himself as temporary, or doesn't he? That's a open question. As you were saying it and listing his tasks and everything, and I'm thinking about what just happened. It's not entirely clear to me. Gaetz probably is thinking, I have the power. I'm amazing. I can bounce the speakers, and I can keep bouncing them until I get one I want. But it occurs to me, it's not entirely clear under the rules to me that McHenry is removable from this position. How do you get rid of the designated acting speaker pro tem? I know how to get rid of a speaker. Can you get rid of this guy?
Yeah, we never did a motion to vacate for the acting temporary speaker pro tempore whose name is on a secret list and you don't even know what's on the list. Right. And in fact, you don't even know who's number 2 on the list because we're not telling you.
That's true. What if Kevin McCarthy is number 2 on the list?
Right, exactly.
Or what if Patrick McHenry is just 1 through 8? I don't know. Or what if there's a new list? Does he get to make a list? Is that one of the powers that he's got?
Mitt Romney, and number 3 is Taylor Swift. You don't know.
It could be anything. It's not entirely clear that a call for a vote to vacate the speaker's office when it's occupied by a duly at the point that
you can't vacate me. I'm not the speaker.
Person. Yeah, it doesn't. I'm not sure. This could be, but on the other hand, you don't want to necessarily say, what's a great precedent? Unlimited and unaccountable power for Patrick McHenry.
Is Patrick McHenry going to move into Pelosi's hideaway so that he doesn't have to occupy the speaker's office?
Maybe.
So he can claim I'm not the speaker, and therefore you can't vacate me?
Right. This is a motion to vacate the speaker's office, and I'm not in it.
Yeah, so folks out there, you may think this is silly. It's not.
No. All right. Well, this is making it much more interesting. And by the way, I guess the other thing I was thinking is this motion to vacate the resolution. I know it's motion/resolution to vacate the speaker's office is also just sort of interesting. And I guess everybody sort of assumed that they could do that because it's a position elected by the members, and it makes a certain amount of sense. But again, in the sense of, I can do whatever the House will allow me to get away with, because if the House will validate it with votes, I can do anything. And I'm thinking about how mad certain Republicans are at Matt Gaetz and how they wanted to get rid of him, and thinking about what it really takes to expel him from the House. And I don't think that they would find enough Republican votes to get rid of him. But I've been thinking about this for a long time. Like, why not? What if somebody made a motion to vacate his seat? Right? Normally, that's not the way you kick anybody out. And he'd have a good case, go to the Supreme Court and say, no, the Constitution is clear. You need 2/3 to expel me. But what if the House says, we didn't expel you. We just declared your seat. It had nothing to do with you. We just didn't like the way the seat looked. We vacated it. Boom. Done. And who's to say? I guess the Supreme Court could say that's not right. And if the House says, yes, it is, and it's a violation of the separation of powers for you to say it isn't, I don't know. And does nobody come to the rescue because it's Matt Gaetz? I don't know.
Right. Really, really interesting.
You're all
stuff.
Vacant. I'm vacant.
So
You're vacant. This whole court is vacant.
Because this one is fascinating, and I could talk about it for another hour.
You should.
Maybe I will.
All right.
But just not to you. I'll just be screaming at clouds, shaking my fist because I'm old and,
I'll say
cranky.
Tickets. Everybody come to Connecticut and look.
Yeah. I just want to get this in while we have time, because I don't want to forget about it. There are 2 new polls out showing everybody hates Bob Menendez. So I thought that was worth mentioning here.
Yes. Things have gotten worse for him over the past day or two, too.
Yeah. New Jersey Senator poll from Stop Big Money / Let America Vote.
I don't know if I trust them, but okay.
Andy Kim, 63, Menendez, 10.
All right.
If there were a third person in the race, Kim gets 42, Tammy Murphy gets 19, and Menendez gets 5.
Tammy Murphy. Okay.
Right? Well, there's other people you never heard of that you're going to hear of.
All right.
Here's another one. This one is from HuffPost. Senator Robert Menendez, who's refusing to resign after being indicted on bribery charges, faces an uphill battle, according to a new poll commissioned by Data for Progress. Andy Kim and real estate investor Kyle Jacey, these are 2 declared announced challengers.
Okay.
48% surveyed would pick Kim, 9% would reelect Menendez, and 3% would choose Jacey.
All right. Some new names.
And 40% unsure.
Okay.
In a more crowded race, Menendez would receive an even smaller share of the vote, but Kim might be less of an indisputable frontrunner if you add a bunch of other people. So if you have Menendez, Kim, Jacey, New Jersey First Lady Tammy Murphy, that's the governor's wife.
Yeah, I was wondering whether that was the case. That
New Jersey
doesn't
State
seem
Senator
like it should poll well.
Majority Leader Teresa Ruiz, Representatives Mikey Sherrill, Josh Gottenheimer, Frank Pallone. Kim gets 27%, Sherrill gets 20%, Menendez, Pallone, and Gottheimer each gets 6. So Frank Pallone
Poor
is a
Frank
very
Pallone.
senior guy. I think he's like 77 or something like that.
Yeah.
If he jumped in,
hurt himself.
people would say, you know what? We just told you we're unhappy about everybody being so old. You're as old as they are. We're not necessarily going to rally to you.
Yeah.
So
it's
Andy
too
Kim is
bad.
still
He's really
primary.
a good guy, though. I
He is.
Frank Pallone.
And he has a tremendous amount of respect, but not in the polls.
Yeah. Well, look.
Of course, local
remarkable
people have
career.
respect in their
Yeah.
local district. That doesn't mean statewide.
True.
Everybody knows exactly who you are.
No, and it's sad, really, in a way, because I mean Frank Pallone, like
He's great.
20, 30 years ago, is Andy Kim.
Yeah.
All the things that you like about Andy Kim, you would say about Frank Pallone. And if it's just that he's 70 and does these things, well, that's great. He's been doing it for a longer time, even better. Or maybe you want a caretaker and then have a real election. But, you know, distinguished career. Don't worry about it. The fact that if you never make it to the Senate, we all appreciate you, Frank Pallone. That's enough. Not everybody gets to be president. Sorry. And I don't know about, I'm surprised how much support there is for the idea of the governor's wife. But okay.
Right. And
I mean,
then,
she's
of course,
accomplished,
there's
too.
Senator Menendez's wife being involved in a car crash.
Yes, that's
That's an older one, I think. It's an older story. But circumstances of the car crash came to light early Wednesday morning. The
Yes.
Record and the New York Times both published articles about how she struck and killed a pedestrian with her
come
previous
on.
Mercedes in Bogota in 2018.
not Bogota, Colombia, but actually New Jersey. Bogota.
And they said cops pretty much immediately ruled her out, not at fault, because they said Coop was jaywalking. It's just a nasty story.
Yeah. Read it. It's the worst thing you could think of.
Right.
So, all right.
Senator Menendez told reporters Wednesday it's a tragic accident, and obviously we think of the family.
Yes.
And Coop's family said they never heard from the Menendezes.
Say he wasn't thinking
And
about
the question about how police pursued subpoenas in the case was relevant, and it all made Politico, and it's just nasty. So
Yeah.
when you said it wasn't a good week for the Menendez family, you meant it.
Yeah. Right. It's a terrible story. And I imagine it's portends the future. Every story will be worse than the next one. All right, Greg. This is your last story for the week, however.
It is.
Unless you want to come back, or something amazing happens, or they find a way to depose
don't think so.
Patrick McHenry tomorrow. No, okay. All right. Well, you take a break.
You
Enjoy
won't have
the
Richard
weekend.
Nixon to kick around anymore.
Till Monday, anyway. They're going to tan and rest over the weekend. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. What the hell were we doing again? Oh, yeah, right. I was wondering on the way out, like, when he said Tammy Murphy was in the running, and I was like, no, Murphy? Like the governor's family Murphy? I mean, Murphy could be any Murphy. There's thousands of Murphys all over the place, and in New Jersey, no shortage of them. But no, it's the governor's wife. But I assumed, I don't know anything about her, but I assumed, all right, well, she's probably pretty accomplished in her own right. And in New Jersey, just because you're the governor's wife doesn't necessarily mean you aren't also a state senator or something like that. New Jersey is weird that way. So, I don't know. Are you interested? I mean, Daily Kos, of course, has endorsed Andy Kim. So I guess that should be end of story. But maybe you want to hear, I mean, if you're taking your cues from Daily Kos, and we're not doing that these days, so whatever. But I mean, it's a pretty good cue, so you can take it or leave it. But if you were interested in who is Tammy Murphy, and honestly, most Daily Kos fans probably, even if you're not willing to just say, oh, I don't know anything about the race, but Marcos and Daily Kos endorse him, so that's it. So you maybe want to do so. You know, you're intellectual people. They understand that. Don't worry about it. They're not going to be insulted at Daily Kos. If you cast about and say, well, who else might we consider? Or if you said, I'd be willing to consider other people, but most Daily Kos fans, I would guess probably not on the surface, instantaneous reaction. How do you like the idea of the governor appointing his wife to the seat? Not much, actually. Long tradition of that happening. I mean, of governors' wives or statewide elected officials' wives succeeding as caretakers anyway to these positions, and actually really is a long. But usually the office holder has to die in order for everybody to accept that. So, and of course, this isn't the governor's office she would be succeeding to. It's a totally different one. But if you were wondering, and maybe you just said unfair to simply be referring to her as the governor's wife, probably true. So I was just curious. So what does Wikipedia have to say about her? Everybody knows Wikipedia knows everything, and it's never wrong about anything, but pretty reliable these days. Tammy Murphy is she's described right out of the gate as an American financier, which is never, a hugely popular thing to tell progressive Democrats. Well, she's chiefly known as a financier, but okay. In what sense? She has been, of course, First Lady of New Jersey since 2018. She is also the chair of professional women's soccer team, the New Jersey-New York Gotham FC, about which I know nothing, but that sounds like fun, which she co-owns with her husband, which, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, does that add an edge to it or take it off? Prior to her political and sports executive roles, Murphy was a banker for Goldman Sachs. That's usually not a huge rally point for anybody, really, but certainly not progressive Democrats. But here's what she has going for her. She was born in Virginia. Ta-da! Virginia Beach, Virginia, in fact. And I don't know, what else do you want to know about her? She attended UVA, because she's from Virginia. If you were wondering, was she there when I was there? Not, I wasn't there, but if you were there, 1987 graduate, and went to work at Goldman Sachs, which is one of the things that you can do with a degree from a fine institution like the University of Virginia. She, let's see, since 2014, she's been chair of New Start New Jersey, a group she founded with her husband. They do a lot of things together. She was appointed to the University of Virginia Board of Visitors in 2015. And that, I think, that's something, because her husband wasn't governor at that point. So, maybe this didn't have much to do with his political activity, although maybe their donations had something to do with it. If they were doing well, she being from Goldman Sachs, and them buying soccer teams and all. All right, so there you have it. It sounds like it's a pretty low percentage chance of it happening anyway, and she's not polling particularly well versus others, let's say. But okay, keeping an eye on it. So I told you that there was some real interesting angles in the story of Nancy Mace and Matt Gaetz working together and going to Steve Bannon's show, and let's read through it so you can kind of get all the nuance and weirdness that's available for. Oh, I gotta hang on. Everything is a train wreck for the New York Times these days. They make you log in every 10 minutes or something. So the link I have, I don't know why this is happening. They must have changed their, it's another opportunity for them to try to sell me more crap that I don't need. But, look, I subscribe and you should just let me in already. Get out of my way. All right. So from a Capitol Hill basement, Bannon stokes the Republican Party meltdown is the title of the piece. Can't find that out on Twitter anymore because they did something weird. You know what I'm talking about. The former Trump advisor has helped create the spectacle of GOP dysfunction, using it to build his own following and those of the right-wing House rebels who took down Kevin McCarthy and maybe also some other people, as it turns out. Then a close-up, high-definition shot of Steve Bannon's decomposing head. And then there he is with the multiple shirts and multiple pens. That's one of the weird things that he likes to do. And so a lot of this takes place in the, like you said, the basement of a townhouse near Capitol Hill. And it's always questionable about Bannon, and the real estate he occupies is always a question mark, since we found out that he used to occupy another townhouse near Capitol Hill. And maybe it's even the same one. I don't know for sure but when he was running Breitbart, the Breitbart Embassy was, as they called it, was both the headquarters nominal headquarters of the publication, but also a weird sex party dungeon that he maintained, and groomed his proteges there and promised them success in their sex lives in ways that nobody had ever been able to deliver for them before. And so he bought their loyalty that way. And then he, and some other properties that he owned, dissolved bodies in acid in the hot tub or whatever. Allegedly. And no one even actually alleges that. We just say it for comedic effect. Hey, we're just joking. Anyway, so the story is by Annie Carney. This is interesting. What an interesting byline. Reporting from the Capitol and Stephen K. Bannon's townhouse nearby. Well, true. On Wednesday morning, that was yesterday, two Republicans who hours earlier had toppled Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House made, as Greg told us, the well-worn trek to a 19th century brick townhouse a few blocks away from the Capitol and entered, as they say, the cluttered sanctuary of Stephen K. Bannon's recording studio. It was Matt Gaetz and Nancy Mace, as you know, and they were appearing jointly on the War Room podcast, one of the few podcasts that goes for longer than we do on a daily basis. And I don't even know what Bannon sounds like, so he's doing it for nothing as far as I'm concerned. But tectonic plate shift here in the Imperial Capital. He got those flourishes. Mr. Bannon told his listeners at Showtime while directing them to donate to his guests online, "We must stand in the breach now. We have to lance the boil that is K Street in this nation," except for the parts of K Street which give me money. From this cave-like studio, not far from where Congress meets, Mr. Bannon, the former Trump advisor, has been stoking the chaos now gripping the Republican Party, capitalizing on the spectacle to build his own following, and using his popular podcast to prop up and egg on the GOP rebels. The main takeaway here, by the way, is that he's remarkably successful at the things he wants to do. They're not good for the country or for anybody else, for that matter, but it is something to aspire to if you are following politics and happenings on Capitol Hill that closely. What if you could run it all from your basement, right? You would try. I would try, I guess. My basement isn't close enough, though, to Capitol Hill to summon people there to answer for their crimes. Mr. Bannon has spent years promoting the lie that the 2020 presidential election was stolen from former President Donald J. Trump, railing against coronavirus mandates and what he refers to as a criminal invasion of the southern border. His obsession of late was toppling Mr. McCarthy and taking out what he describes as uniparty. Remember, I told you that code was in use these days? It's his. Uniparty Republicans who have become indistinguishable from Democrats. And everyone knows how worthy that analysis always has been, and how super geniuses who have always had their finger on the pulse of the American people, like Ralph Nader when he was running for president in 2000, really are. But that's what's at the heart of this nonsense, too. Same thing as usual. With Mr. McCarthy's historic downfall this week, his wing of the party has claimed its most prominent trophy. Mr. Bannon represents a clear through line from the grievance-driven MAGA base to Congress. And his role in the meltdown that played out this week in the House helps explain why the Republican Party appears to be eating its own. He is a vital part of a feedback loop of red meat media hits and social media posts, online fundraising, and unfettered preaching to an often angry and fervently right-wing base that rewards disruptions and detests institutions, no matter what they are. Unless, of course, it's the institution of themselves, in which case they have great reverence for it. But it's very interesting to see how he operates. You'd be crazy not to want to be able to do the same thing if you could. In past decades, right-wing rebels on Capitol Hill have encountered trouble getting real traction. Shunned by lobbyists, and big money political action committees, excluded from leadership suites in the Capitol, and disregarded by Fox News. I doubt that, but with the help of Mr. Bannon, who streams live for 4 hours every weekday. How do you like that? Mr. Gaetz and others don't need to rely on any of that. Now, 2 takeaways from that. One, he's a pipeline for them and a way to get around their usual traditional exclusion from these circles, if you really believe that that part is true. But the other thing I want to observe is, wow, live streaming for 4 hours every weekday. And I can't imagine getting anything else done in life if you did that. But it strikes me that this too, like most punditry, this is a lifestyle choice. He's got people. Right now, I would stream live for 4 hours every day if I could just say somebody else is taking care. Once I turn off the microphone, I'm done for the day and I can do what I want to do, even if I involve myself in the same subjects all day long. If I'm not editing, if I'm not the one posting to the podcast to Libsyn, if I'm not the one taking care of gathering up the links, and I mean, I do have the help of Scott, but if I could just give Scott, $1 million a year to just take care of all of that stuff for me, and I can turn off the mic and walk away, and I have staff to, clean up the studio and fix things up and post the stuff and take care of promotion and make sure you tweet out the link to the podcast and all that stuff, I'd do 4 hours, we could fill it. Anyway, so that's what he does. It's a lifestyle thing for him. And, I guess congratulations. In the meantime, what's he doing for everybody else? Mr. Bannon casts the agitators as heroes to his devoted MAGA acolytes and helps boost their small dollar fundraising. He participates in calls with members and donors. He offers strategic advice. He hounds Fox News hosts, who he argues don't give them a fair shake. But mostly he offers an unfiltered platform where individual rabble-rousers can speak directly to the base, known on the War Room as the Posse, creating more incentives for them to wreak havoc on the House floor. For weeks, Mr. Bannon has been strategizing with Mr. Gaetz on the bid to take down Mr. McCarthy, offering himself up as a sounding board as Mr. Gaetz plotted his moves. And I think at this point, it sounds very sophisticated, but remember that the, strategizing and sounding board, and here's what you do to remove the spirit. It's one thing to get it to be successful, but what you do is you make a motion to raise your own resolution. You offer a resolution to literally, that's it. I just declare the office of the speaker vacant. And it's a privileged motion. And so to bring it up, a privileged resolution. So then you file it, and ordinarily, there's a lot of work to be done gathering votes and making sure you have support, et cetera. But remember, if he was going to end up with the support of the Democrats, he's looking for 6 or 7 Republicans. That's all the work that goes into it. If I can gather 6 or 7 supporters, that's all it's going to take if the Democrats do their job. And he didn't even really expect the Democrats to, quote unquote, do their job at all. He thought that they would do something else. So he just wanted to demonstrate the fact that it, could happen if the Democrats did the actual work for him. He'd only have to gather 6 or 7 people. So, you write the resolution that says, Speaker's office is vacant. You offer it. You have to know this much. You have to call it a privileged resolution and seek its recognition as a privileged resolution. They don't have to follow the rules, I guess. The House could have opted not to, but it's a question of could they hold on to enough Republican votes to validate that view of things that they don't view it as privileged. But anyway, I guess they decided to do it. I don't know whether they really thought that this thing was going to work or not, but that's the strategy. Like, you have to understand that there are privileged motions, and that you'll, if you offer one and they recognize it, that they'll have 48 hours to schedule the debate. And then you see if you can get your 6 or 7 Republicans to say they will vote the way you want them to, and then wait and see what the Democrats do. So that's the big strategy. That's the big thing that he's, the super genius has helped him with, is we know about these things. I've strategized just as much and probably more complicated stuff. It's just that nobody listens to me, maybe because my basement is far away. Maybe it's because Democrats don't do this stuff. Maybe it's because nobody should do this stuff, and Republicans are the only ones crazy or stupid enough to listen to this flesh golem idiot in the basement over here. And let's light the government on fire at his instruction. And they have that, and we don't, and maybe that's just fine. But, it would be fun, but that's it. I don't know if it would be good for America, but it would be fun for me, and it's fun for him. So, as we were saying, for weeks he's been strategizing with Gaetz, fantasizing really, saying, what if you did this, and what if you did that? Wouldn't that be amazing? Yeah, sure. What would happen? I don't know, but it would be amazing. And then you do it, and oh my God, it worked. So what happens? Kaboom! Mr. Bannon texted a reporter on Monday night, minutes after Mr. Gaetz filed his long-dangled motion to oust the speaker. And remember, in hindsight, it looks like he's a super genius, but he's kaboom texting because a random member of Congress has filed a motion to oust the speaker. Stuff gets filed all the time. People have filed motions to impeach the president. People have filed motions to expel, other members, to declare bad pizza illegal. Just, you file a speaker. Kaboom! Kaboom! There's no kaboom yet. But, because this one worked out, it looks like he's a super strategist, but it's really just a hyperventilating kid. Anyway, he has also encouraged hard-right lawmakers to use the House floor to yank legislation as far to the right as possible, earning themselves media attention in the process. And that's the currency here, is media attention, not effectiveness or getting things passed, because they don't pass. As a matter of fact, one of the other stories circulating this morning, I'm reminded of, is, did I put this one in pocket or did I just repeat it on social media? Yeah, here it is. And it's Steve Bannon tweeting his piece around from the Maddow blog. Jim Jordan touts this year's most significant accomplishment. Now he's into the House Speaker race. Here he's saying, I'm the author of the most significant legislative accomplishment of the year, a hardline immigration bill, except that the bill hasn't passed at all. It has, as Bannon described it, as struggled for months, as even some House Republicans considered it too extreme. Before, it had passed the House in May, but it hasn't become law because the Senate doesn't want anything to do with it, and the president would never sign it. But that's his most significant legislative accomplishment, which is, strictly speaking, not a legislative accomplishment yet. They passed a bill, but it's just a bill. It's only a bill, and it's sitting there on Capitol Hill, as you know. So, anyway, that's sort of the point, is that you can declare anything to be an accomplishment, I guess, and yanking legislation, such as it is, as far to the right as possible, doesn't actually do anything if it doesn't pass. But, he's about whipping up frenzies, Bannon is. So he's encouraged hard-right lawmakers to do that, and he can pay them back in the currency they really care about, not affecting policy, but gathering media attention for themselves in the process. His advice to them: get an amendment. Make it as outrageous as possible. Just be on there. Don't worry if you're not on Fox. We'll cut it. We'll play it. And his platform is big enough that actually matters to them. And he can pay them in the currency they want, but can't get paid by mainstream media. We'll boost it, because it's a hobby horse for me. But luckily for me, meaning him, I've built my hobby horse into a reasonably large enough following on my podcast that I can raise money for you and for myself and keep the money flowing, even if I don't have a current fraud going, defrauding my MAGA supporters from out of their money with a build the wall scheme or whatever else he's supposed to be doing. Now, keeping in mind, by the way, they do mention this later in the article, he's doing all this when he's supposed to be in jail, having been convicted of contempt of Congress. And how amazing is it that he's been convicted of contempt of Congress and he's parked 3 blocks away and undermining everything that they're trying to do there and disrupting all of their business when he's supposed to be in jail for having effed with it already. But, I guess rules don't apply. And if you're dissolving people in hot tubs, it probably doesn't. So, but anyway, that's interesting. So he can pay them in that publicity currency as well as fundraising. On Wednesday, Mr. Bannon introduced his guests on his podcast as the architects and heroes of yesterday and gave them airtime to make a fundraising pitch. And now the interesting part in terms of understanding Nancy Mace comes up. I do need help because they're coming after me, said Ms. Mace, who represents a politically competitive district. They've threatened to dry up all my money. I've had multiple members previous to the vote last night threaten to withhold fundraising if I took this vote. It's a huge amount of pressure. They call your staff. They scare them. Twice, Mr. Bannon cued her to spell out her campaign website so that listeners could find it. His audience is still wary of Ms. Mace, as Greg read for us, a fiscal conservative, maybe, who leans toward the center, not, on some social issues, and voted to hold Mr. Bannon in criminal contempt for defying a subpoena from the January 6th committee. So again, I guess one of the other essential characteristics of what Bannon is doing, and I guess you gotta kind of admire it as he certainly lives for the moment. Right? Lives in the moment. She has voted to hold the radio host and strategist Steve Bannon in contempt of Congress, and he's got having her on his show and introducing her as the hero and architect of yesterday, and here's her website, and you should give her money and help her out. I mean, he literally, whatever the last thing that happened was, he shares this characteristic with Trump. I share plenty of characteristics I comically remind everybody with that contemptible idiot, both of those contemptible idiots, but I hold a grudge a lot longer. And I don't know, maybe everybody says you shouldn't, that it's psychologically more healthy for you not to, but this seems schizophrenic. I don't know how that's psychologically more helpful for you, but okay. He has somebody, I mean, I'm sure the day she voted to hold him in contempt, she's a traitor, she should be dragged out and shot, she should be hung from the highest lamppost, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. Now today, but she did what I wanted today. She's a hero of the Republic. Everybody send her money. So you can see why the audience is skeptical. Then, of course, the tactical view, Bannon sees her as a gift. Her vote to oust McCarthy allowed him and his cohorts to push back on the notion that it was only an angry group of ultra-MAGA hardliners who had lost faith in Mr. McCarthy. Except Greg tells you, you should entertain the possibility that Nancy Mace is, in fact, an ultra-MAGA hardliner, despite the image she's trying to cultivate. And honestly, whoever did the photo editing for this piece, the picture that they selected for Nancy Mace doesn't make it all that difficult to imagine her in that role. It's a very interesting picture of her. So I encourage you to take a look. Nancy is not a hard-right, intransigent lawmaker, Mr. Gaetz said on the show. Nancy is a fiscal hawk. Interesting. Mr. Mace, or Ms. Mace rather, has previously called Mr. Gaetz a fraud and accused him of opposing McCarthy because he wouldn't defend him against allegations that he sex-trafficked minors. You'd think that Gaetz, too, would not be able to put this aside and sit next to her and share credit on the show. But maybe he's just that mercenary, or maybe that dumb. I don't know which. But all of that appeared to be water under the bridge the morning after the McCarthy ouster. There were, at least temporarily, allies. On Wednesday, they sat next to each other in Bannon's basement, where books about China, Trump, and sensible weight loss programs live in messy piles on any flat surface that avails itself. Notes from Mr. Trump written in his trademark Sharpie. Steve, your show is so great. Proud of you. Donald. And Trump is very much like this too. You're a traitor. You're a savior. I'm proud of you. Your show's so great. You're an idiot. I want you assassinated. All those notes sit stacked with other miscellany. The group was still digesting the historic events of the previous day while figuring out their next moves. They decided, together, to use Wednesday's broadcast to look ahead rather than to dunk on the former speaker. They're very online, these guys, right? He was punching down. It was really ugly last night, said Ms. Mace, whom Mr. McCarthy targeted at his evening news conference, suggesting she was lying when she claimed he had not kept his word. I think she might be right about that. During commercial breaks, they mulled who might be the next speaker, but there was no clear answer. They really don't know. I asked Jim Jordan on the floor yesterday, you're going to be the next speaker? Ms. Mace said. She turned to Mr. Gaetz with an idea. Want to go meet with any of them today, together? like Scalise or Jordan or anyone. He was non-committal. He's pretty cagey, as it turns out. Mr. Bannon was, too. I'm just going to see how it develops, he said. Who's got the stones to take on the apparatus? Mr. Gaetz described himself to people as a Bannonite tribalist. We'll see how long that lasts. I mean, until it's inconvenient, I guess. Mr. Bannon, for his part, is in awe of Mr. Gaetz, whom he compares to Daniel Webster. How do you like that? He credits the Florida Republican, not the current Daniel Webster, the historical one. He credits the Florida Republican with recognizing early on last year how helpful a slim cop majority could be to the hard right. He sat there in July and he talked about how we weren't going to have a 30 or a 40 seat majority, but that it was actually going to be better, Bannon said. We're going to have leverage. He's a very special guy. It's an interesting view to take of someone like Matt Gaetz. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm going to continue with the reading. We're getting towards the end of this article, and I think it's very interesting and revealing. A lot of launching pad for a lot of other discussions too. We left off with Bannon saying that he viewed Gaetz as something of a visionary, and he was the first one to recognize that a slim majority was better for the hard right anyway than a 30 to 40 seat majority was. And that's true just so long as you're willing to or get excited by the idea of nihilism and disruption. And they are excited by that, because, they are nihilists at heart, and they have a base that cheers giving the finger to the establishment, even if it shoots themselves in the foot. That they're fine with that. They love shooting themselves in the foot. That's why they do it all the time. I mean, literally, the base is out there accidentally shooting themselves daily. Anyway, many of the newer rebels in Congress, the piece continues, have relied on Mr. Bannon for backing as they look to make their own mark. And it's easy to make your own mark. You don't have to know anything. You just have to be willing to destroy things. So that opens up new opportunities for people who are otherwise not particularly capable legislators. For instance, Representative Lauren Boebert of Colorado said she was grateful to him for recently offering her a slot on his show to talk about the southern border rather than to rehash her embarrassing evening at Beetlejuice, which is interesting. And it's funny because that gives Bannon the opportunity to say, well, I have a very high-minded show. We're going to look past the gossip. Whereas, honestly, if you're tuning in at that particular moment in time, because Lauren Boebert is going to be on the show, you're really hoping it'll be like, well, okay, but tell us what was going on at Beetlejuice. Like, what the hell were you thinking about that? If she had been on the Howard Stern show, that would have been the question. Everybody is thinking about this, and you're going to have to explain it to us. But on the Bannon show, we've brought her on for her keen legislative mind. Steve is an actual trusted source, she says. He understands that my one personal night out does not impact the work that I've been doing for 4 years. There is no work that you've been doing for 4 years. Steve understands the base and what the base wants. I don't go on there for the donor aspect, but I'm grateful when folks do chip in. She's on there for the donor aspect. Mr. Bannon's name is often greeted with an eye roll, even among Trump loyalists, because, he's been declared a traitor in the past by Trump loyalists. And they remember, even if he doesn't. He's very, I will say, maybe it seems like in other instances anyway, this trait of being able to put aside personal grudges and plow forward is an admirable character trait. I don't know if that's really what's going on here, but there's just very little that you can describe as an admirable character trait with respect to Steve Bannon. But okay, his name is often greeted with an eye roll, even among Trump loyalists. He's seen by some as a man who made the wrong bet on candidates, like the failed Senate candidate in Alabama, Roy Moore, for instance, among dozens of other ones, and has an inflated sense of his own influence. And here I'll just pause even before we get to the other litany of complaints about him, and I'll have to repeat it all for effect so that it all comes together at once. But essentially, he's greeted with an eye roll. He's the man who made the wrong bet on candidates. He's bet the wrong on candidates, on strategy, on everything for a long, long time. And honestly, this is what's so fascinating about the dynamics here. This is the kind of record that Matt Gaetz, if he found himself in opposition to Bannon for whatever reason, would on the floor list as all of the negatives of Steve Bannon. You're asking me to be loyal to Steve Bannon? He's the guy who bet on Roy Moore. Come on. You say he's the most effective strategist of all time, and when in fact, yada yada. Right. But here, ignore all of that. Be Gimmitarian, go on his show, and sit there and he's the greatest strategist of all time. Why? Because he's willing to say about you that you're the greatest legislative visionary of all time, the best tactical or tactician that the Republican Party has ever had, at least today. So, it's log rolling. Everybody, coaxes the other, or eggs the other one on, and flatters the other one. But yeah, for all that he's done wrong, if he finds himself in opposition, it'll be Steve Bannon is an idiot and a traitor. Look at all the things he's done. And here's the litany, right? Bet on the wrong candidates like Roy Moore, has an inflated sense of his own influence. He was charged with defrauding donors who were giving money to build a wall along the southern border before being pardoned for it by Mr. Trump. He was convicted and sentenced to 4 months in jail for criminal contempt of Congress for defying a subpoena, and is free while he appeals the conviction. And like I said, there's a special irony to his having, to his being out of jail pending appeal, and the job he's chosen for himself, disrupting and upending Congress and its work, while free pending appeal of a jail sentence for contempt of Congress. There's something special about that, I think. So that's an amazing list of things. And by the way, remember, again, Gaetz is on the program. So is Mace. And they're like, we need fundraising and we trust Bannon to do this and to direct funds in our direction, because after all, we're under attack. And it never occurs to them as, fiscal hawks or genuinely decent people, if they believe that about themselves, that, well, I'm going to go on the show of the guy who was convicted of defrauding donors to ask him to steer donations to me. And that there are people listening and are like, I should donate based on what Steve Bannon says I should be doing, because after all, he's the guy who defrauds donors. But nothing has to make sense in their world, and they let go of everything. So, whatever. Then the picture that I saw a tighter shot of the other day, where I was describing all of the Christian iconography up on the mantelpiece, strategically placed behind Bannon, so that anybody who takes pictures of him doing his show will fill the frame with Christian iconography. But then also it's a framed quote of himself up there next to Jesus. There's Jesus And then there's Steve Bannon, because he's the most humble guy in the world. Anyway, back to the story. Last week, as Mr. Bannon's cohort debated amendments to the annual military spending bill on the House floor, Mr. Bannon was glued to C-SPAN like a proud stage parent. "This is red meat," Mr. Bannon exulted as Representative Matt Rosendale of Montana defended an amendment that would prohibit mandatory coronavirus vaccines for service members, referring to the vaccine as an, quote, experimental drug. Mr. Bannon, an unrepentant agent of chaos, admits he was spoiling for a government shutdown. "You create a firestorm now that totally changes things," he said. "People right now think government is a benefit. I'm going to show government spending as cootie infested." Adult in the room. Mr. Bannon is also famously temperamental. He has turned on his former friends, like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. Yeah, her name is really Taylor. But why? For backing McCarthy during the speaker's race and on the debt ceiling deal. She has been blacklisted from the show for months. But after she said she was opposed to any spending bills that included aid to Ukraine, Mr. Bannon said he was warming back up to her. "There's always a path back," he said. He's a forgiving soul, like Jesus, as you know. On Wednesday morning, Mr. Bannon and his guests tried to temper their glee. "Do not allow the posse to get punch drunk," Mr. Gaetz said on the show. There was more work to do. Mr. Gaetz and Ms. Mace stayed for 3 segments of the show until it was time for Mr. Rosendale to pick the mantle up and fire up the base. "I'll talk to you later today," Mr. Bannon said as Mr. Gaetz showed himself out. That's the end of the article. It's an interesting illustration of what goes on in this weirdo dungeon that they maintain off of on Capitol Hill, just nearby the Capitol, and close enough that members can walk and show up as guests. I wonder whether, if we were closer, well, one, I hate having having anybody come into the house. So I don't know. Do we do the guest thing? We could have call-ins, but we're not wholly convinced of the value of a parade of guests on this show. But it would be pretty interesting. And it's a way to build influence and to trade in influence. People bring their star power and you trade it for influence and fundraising for yourself. And, it's a path. And I don't know, just an interesting one and interesting to know what they're doing down there. And, I don't know how dangerous it might be. All right, let's see. Other things to bring to your attention. Gosh, there's a lot. Where to go next? Friday is a good long read day. There's more Clarence Thomas ProPublica corruption dropping today. It's nothing new in terms of hot news stories illustrating corruption, but rather good meta-analysis of what the corruption demonstrates. Perhaps a good Friday read. There's more from ProPublica. We're not going to cut them out of the action. How about this one? Just in terms of generically illustrating how bad things are going to get out there. And I think this maybe needs to be read in conjunction with something else that I saw today and repeated on social media, if I can just find it and bring it up afterwards. I'll read you the article. ProPublica, again, where it's published. Idaho banned abortion. Not a hard thing for you to guess. Maybe you even actually remember them doing that. Then it turned down support for pregnancies and births. Remember, this is all about, we got to ban abortion because we're pro-pregnancy and birth, except for paying for it. And people keep telling you this is actually pretty wildly misogynistic and they're just, out to control women. And some people say, that's not, I understand where they're coming from. I disagree with them about abortion, but I think it's just about and where does life begin, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what about if you sabotage all of those lives? People have been pointing at things like this since forever, and it's only now coming into focus from people who didn't want to, for whatever reason, believe this about their fellow human beings. But, sometimes they're very awful people. So what's going on here? Since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade last year, the state's, that is Idaho's, GOP-led legislature has disbanded a maternal mortality committee because who cares about that, failed to expand postpartum Medicaid coverage, because who cares once you're born, and turned down federal grants for child care, because, again, it used to be, I mean, even the progressives who recognize this said, yeah, well, they draw the line at when you're born, they don't care about you anymore. They never cared about you before you were born either. It was just that there was leverage to be had. Because people are, like puppies, people love babies. And sometimes it's the same emotion. I can't deny that. And they were just trading on it for votes. So, of course, I'm going to stand up to defend the babies. Well, are you going to take care of them once they're born? No, because there's no real constituency for that. And also, even Democrats are pro-child. So I don't want to share the spotlight with them. I want to find a place where they're never going to stand alongside me so that I can point to myself as being the hero of this situation. Anyway, let me read you a little bit about this so we can get through it. Audrey Dutton reporting for ProPublica on this one. When the U.S. Supreme Court last year overturned Roe v. Wade, it green-lighted the kind of near-universal abortion restrictions that Idaho lawmakers had spent the previous 2 years crafting. Governor Brad Little said the state should turn to helping women who might otherwise have terminated pregnancies. But that was just to get past the goalposts and then do whatever the hell he wanted. We absolutely must come together like never before to support women and teens facing unexpected or unwanted pregnancies, said Little. That's the thing you say. A Republican who supports the abortion ban. About 1,700 to 2,000 people a year in Idaho had abortions before the court ruling. Families, churches, charities, and local and state government must stand ready to lift them up and help them and their families with access to adoption services, health care, financial and food assistance, counseling and treatment, and family planning. That's how you answer the they don't care about them after they're born charge. But what do you do? It's what you say to answer the charge. What do you do to answer the charge? The opposite. Because since the June 22 decision, Idaho has failed to deliver, even as other conservative states with abortion bans took steps to enhance their safety nets for families during pregnancy and after birth. They just haven't seen the Steve Bannon style light yet. Eventually, they'll understand that, I can do this and possibly even steal the money instead. I don't know whether that's what they've been doing in Idaho, but hey, the possibility exists, right? Remember, we're following Steve Bannon here. He steals. So maybe we cut these things and then pocket the money. It might work. It worked in Mississippi for Brett Favre, so what the hell? Anyway, but so let's see. Where do we leave off? Idaho legislators disbanded the state committee that investigated the root causes of maternal deaths. Who effing cares? Making it the only state in the nation with no such mortality review. God killed them. In the meantime, let's keep the money. They allowed 2 bills to die, because they love to let everything die, including the women in their state, that would have put Idaho on the same track as nearly every other state with abortion restrictions, including Florida, Kentucky, and Texas. But maybe this is a way to bypass DeSantis as even more cruel and reactionary, if you want to run for president. So they allowed 2 bills to die that would have put Idaho on the same track as nearly every other state with abortion restrictions like Florida, Kentucky, and Texas by extending postpartum Medicaid coverage to 12 months. It's a good thing. Taking care of mom, taking care of the kids, right? No, F that. Idaho's Medicaid coverage ends 2 months after birth, the minimum under federal law. They would get rid of that, too, if they could, I'm sure. They turned down $36 million in federal grants. They turned down $36 million in federal grants to support child care this summer, while other states with new abortion restrictions, Alabama, Louisiana, Missouri, among them, made investments in early childhood education and daycare. Idaho lawmakers at the same time attributed the decision to a pending audit of a different batch of grants. I can't do anything until the audit is over. The audit, yes. Democrats generally support these kinds of measures, but there's no difference between the parties. It's a uniparty. They generally support these kinds of measures, but Idaho Republicans dominate the state capitol and therefore control which bills move forward. Representative Brent Crane, a longtime Republican leader who chairs the House State Affairs Committee, said GOP lawmakers last year had hoped to put forward bills to improve health care and support for kids and families after the Supreme Court struck down federal protection for abortion rights. They instead got, weirdly, bogged down in debate over exceptions to the abortion ban. Idaho has some work to do, Crane said. Be patient with us. Meanwhile, people die. The need is urgent, according to Emily Allen, policy associate for the nonprofit Idaho Voices for Children. The state, she said, needs health care funding and other support in place to adjust to life after the abortion ban. Things have changed, Allen said. We can either bury our heads in the sand or we can respond with good policy that is very family-centric. Oh, well, they went for burying their heads. But Blaine Conzatti, if I'm pronouncing that right, president of the Idaho Family Policy Center and a leading anti-abortion lobbyist, is not bothered by the lack of government support. Pregnancies, births, and child cares are not the purview of the government, he said, but of families, communities, charities, and most of all, churches. The Bible is clear, and the history of Christendom broadly is clear, that it's the church's responsibility to meet the needs of the poor and to ensure that people have the services that they need to live flourishing lives, Conzatti said. And no one's allowed to help, apparently. That's what the Bible says. There'll be no helping. Thank you. No action set Idaho apart from other abortion-banned states more than when the Idaho legislature allowed its Maternal Mortality Review Committee to die this year. Amazing. Pro-life. Well, even the committees that are pro-life die in Idaho. The committee had been granted unique powers to review private health care and other records of women who died during or within a year after pregnancy and draw conclusions about the root causes of those deaths. Its budget of $10,000 a year came only from federal funds, so keeping the committee going seemed pro forma. Every single state, New York and Texas alike, had put one in place. But in Idaho, a lobbyist for the ultra-conservative political nonprofit stood up and spoke against it at a hearing. We're not even paying for it. It doesn't even cost us a dime, but I'm still against it. Fred Birnbaum, Legislative Affairs Director of Idaho Freedom Foundation, said studying the causes of Idaho's roughly 10 to 15 preventable maternal deaths each year risked inviting a push for more government support to help keep people from dying, and you can't have that. And government support was anathema to his group, whereas the deaths of 15 women sounds like a party. Anyway, you know the old saying, all roads lead to Rome, said Birnbaum, who testified against the committee's creation on similar grounds in 2019. Well, all government-created committees lead to the call for more government spending. Of course, it's federal spending, not your problem, but he's going to save the country from itself. 15 dead women at a time. Birnbaum's assessment was partly correct. Idaho's Maternal Mortality Committee had made recommendations that could increase public spending, such as extending Medicaid coverage postpartum, as every other state is doing, expanding access to naloxone, is that right? How do you pronounce that? The drug to prevent death from opioid overdose. And it could lead to providing better housing and childcare support. But of the 52 recommendations in the committee's final report, most called for no new government spending. The role of such committees has not been so controversial in other Republican-led states. The Texas Maternal Mortality and Morbidity Review Committee, for example, has been around for about a decade and is now part of the entire effort to reduce tragic outcomes from pregnancy and birth, said Chris Van Dusen, Director of Media Relations for the Texas Department of State Health Services. The Texas Committee's findings in 2018 that patients had bled to death in childbirth helped push the state to adopt recommendations and protocols for hospitals to train their employees to measure blood loss and to educate people on what is abnormal bleeding. You'd think that maybe hospitals would have been trained in that already, but I guess not, because women, maybe? Birth-related hemorrhage deaths started to fall the following year, Van Dusen said. Sounds good, right? He said the committee has generally had the support of Texas lawmakers who voted last year to adopt one of its recommendations and extend postpartum Medicaid coverage to 12 months. Advocates for the creation of Idaho's committee in 2019 pointed out how other states have helped reduce maternal death rates. Seatbelt laws in Nevada, substance use disorder treatment in Michigan, urgent messages to doctors and hospitals in Florida. Lucky Bourne, the long time, are you kidding me? The name Lucky Bourne? Bourn, but still. Lucky Bourne, the longtime Republican coroner of, Minidoka County, maybe, and a member of the Maternal Mortality Committee, said its demise means Idaho will have no window into maternal deaths in the wake of its abortion law because the committee's final report used data from 2021. And I could see, now I'm beginning to make some more sense to me. If you ban abortions, what are we always told it's going to happen? Well, it's not going to stop people from having abortions. They'll just resort to dangerous, illegal back alley abortions. But I can't have you being right about that. So what if we prevent all study of maternal death of any kind from here on in? Then if people are dying from illegal abortions, we won't know and we won't hear about it, and you won't be right. Well, you will be right, but no one will be able to prove that you're right. And we can say, they're not, they're wrong. There's extra women out there that we never even knew existed. There's more moms and babies out there than Idaho has ever had. In fact, there's 1 billion of them in Idaho, even though our population is 1 point something million in total. Anyway, that's a thought. That could be what's behind it. I was very disappointed in the legislature when they did not continue the funding of it, Bourne said. The thought that comes to my mind is, with the change in the abortion laws in the state of Idaho, do you think that might have a correlation in the rise of the mortality rate of the women who don't want to be pregnant? Yes, I do, and therefore we won't study it. The number of maternal deaths since the abortion ban took effect has not yet been reported, and probably can't be. The committee, I would add, believed it would have 10 maternal deaths to evaluate from 2022 if it had continued. ProPublica identified at least 2 deaths during pregnancy and childbirth that the Maternal Mortality Committee could have evaluated. One was from complications during childbirth in 2022, according to the Women's Obituary. The other was a murder-suicide this year that claimed the life of the pregnant mother and her toddler, according to the sheriff in the rural North Idaho County where she lived. You might want to know a little something about that one. Little's staff told ProPublica that he will bring forward a proposal in 2024 to continue the work of this important committee. Lawmakers are also poised to consider other proposals that have previously gone nowhere. Idaho House Majority Leader Megan Blanksma, a Republican from Elmore County, said she is working on bills that would improve prenatal and postpartum health care, resume the study of maternal deaths, and support young families. Blanksma also said she will revive legislation to extend Medicaid coverage for postpartum care to a full year, a concept she said she dropped last session because of the ballooning cost of Medicaid. So, some good, some bad, let's say. We're working on a full package introduced come January, Blanksma told ProPublica, but in the meantime, whatever. Konzati, the anti-abortion lobbyist, advocates a more hands-off approach from the state. Idaho has at least 16 pregnancy resource centers spread across every region of the state. Many in Idaho are Christian-oriented organizations that offer counseling, referrals, and some material support like diapers. There you go. Use that to mop up the blood. According to the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the center's goal, back when Roe v. Wade was in effect, was to persuade women to carry their pregnancies to term rather than have abortions. Few Idaho centers offer medical care beyond pregnancy tests and heartbeat ultrasounds. Once you're born, you're on your own. But those centers are where Konzati said people who have unplanned pregnancies should now look to for help, even though they don't offer any. They embody his vision of a world before legalized abortion and before Medicaid got involved in the lives of poor families. Crane, the Republican House leader, wouldn't rule out state-funded support. State spending. Government spending? What? Yes, state-funded support for pregnancy centers if there's political will for it among lawmakers. Every option is on the table, including spending more money and having more government influence over our daily lives, which was anathema to everything except, oh, am I getting the money? My groups are getting it, the people I know? Oh, okay. Thumbs up for that one. What a huge mystery. How did that get turned around? Anyway, I said there was something else I wanted to share with you, and from social media. The Blue Sky post from one Rabbi Danya Rutenberg, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, saying, reminding us, hey, all the things that maybe you dismissed as hyperbole from others, like the abortion checkpoints are about to begin, might in fact be true. She is repeating the Blue Sky post from Leftward Swing, noting with a screen grab here, freedom is when it's illegal to use a public road in Texas to travel for an abortion. What? Yeah. As we say here in Colorado, this is interesting, Texas, south until you smell it, east until you step in it. Okay, I have to reflect on exactly what that might mean. But what's this all about? A screen grab from the Texas Tribune of this story with this headline, with no opposition in the room, a rural Texas county makes traveling for an abortion on its roads illegal. Wow, socialism breaking through here. Cochran County, which borders New Mexico, joins a small group of other rural Texas counties that have passed these ordinances. Abortion rights supporters say, I hope correctly, that the new policies are, I hope incorrectly, that the new policies are not illegal. I was going to say that the abortion rights supporters say that they'll challenge the legality in court, and I'm sure they're going to do that, but not illegal, or at least not currently. That sounds interesting. Jamie Lozano Carver wrote that piece for the Texas Tribune. Maybe I can go and grab that piece and share that with you. But how do you like that? They're going to use the power of government to make it illegal. You can't use the roads except for approved uses. It depends on where you're going. You want to drink and drive on it? Well, you can't drink and drive, but it won't be charges of illegally using the roads. It'll just be illegally, driving under the influence. But if you are going to a store we don't like, or maybe to a church we don't like, or maybe to vote and we think you're the wrong color, maybe you could be charged for illegally using roads.
You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
I mean, they won't charge that with you with that yet, but they're starting with abortion, and who knows when they'll get around to coming around for you. Well, maybe Justice Putnam knows. He'll round things up on his program, The West Coast and Cookbook and Speakeasy. Next, right here on Netroots Radio, the usual collection of stories from around the country and around the world that we may have missed. Stay tuned.